Hi, what I was hoping to look at today was a simple rendered elevation based on a student exercise done earlier this year. We were given a small section of an existing building to analyse with a view to providing a rendered elevation that would be suitable for conceptual design. So what you can see here is the final image produced, and I was just going to walk through the process as to how we got to that final image and some options that were available in the steps along the way. First thing I did was, rather than do a full site survey with the interest of the fact that it was a conceptual design and we were time constrained, is I took some photos of the relevant location. I took a few relevant notes and a few key dimensions that I could use at a later stage, and then using the Photoshop merge command in Bridge. So if you go to the Tools menu, Photoshop, Photo Merge, you can combine a number of site photos together to produce a panorama view that you can scan around a wider area than you would with a normal camera or iPhone. That blends them into Photoshop. You merge those layers together. All I've added for my own reference is a reference dimension from ground level up to the first floor. And after that, just for variation in this regard, it could be drawn straight over in Photoshop as per the floor plan video I've done earlier. But what I've done on this occasion is I decided to work up the image in Rhino to begin with, just in case we were looking at turning that information into a 3D model at a later stage. In order to start down the path to get that all completed, the first thing we need to do is import a bitmap. So if you go to the front command in the upper left hand corner of the viewport, click background bitmap place. You can then source the image that's relevant to the job. In this particular case, I'll just find it very quickly. And for example, I would find the relevant photo in here, stairs partial, and in this particular case I'll just cancel it, but then I can then take that reference dimension that I had before, 5 meters, 5,120 millimeters from floor to ceiling, use a scale reference line and then rescale that bitmap to suit that position in the model space. Now I've done that on a previous video. If you look through that, it'll give you the step-by-step process to do that. Then all I've done is taken a command, a layer. Let's see if I'll just bring it up. You'll see it there on screen. I've then created a folder and then just built with line work straight over the top of the photo the various elements which make up that elevation. So you can see there in the perspective viewport, I've basically just drawn in 3D space that elevation. Now I wanted to stress it's not totally accurate because we're relying on the accuracy of the underlying photograph, which has its own distortions. However, for the purposes of concept design, it can be quite useful, and particularly with a little bit of fine-tuning and a few additional check dimensions, it can be a useful and time-efficient way to design spaces, at least to get the initial site information. So you can see the line work there on the page. I'll just render it. Oh, sorry, I'll just go to the front view. I'll turn that background bitmap off for a moment so you can see it there on the background. I've then rendered that surface. It's just rendering there now. Let it finish, one moment. Post effects, we want to just have the curves in place. We'll zoom in just slightly. And you can see that we have a pretty good image to work with. We can then save that image to the appropriate location. And in this particular case, I chose two different approaches. First is that we can, if need be, develop that image up as a 3D model in Rhino. Or alternatively, if we want to have a more developed rendering approach, we can export that line work or export that model into Cinema 4D as per this one here, and then we can render it within Cinema 4D. So the advantage of that is that we've got a lot more variation. I'll just zoom in slightly, with which we can achieve our outcomes. So even though it's a 3D modeling package, it can also be used to render 2D forms with a whole variety of different outcomes. Okay, in that particular case, we're using the Sketch and Tune plugin, and we're just selecting from the default settings as required to get the resultant image that we need. Now, that was an aside. In this particular case, what we were doing was working in Photoshop. So I'll just bring Photoshop back up. I'm getting there. Okay, they're the images that we had before, and this is the image that we're aiming for at the end of the day. So the image that was imported, I'll just take that off, was one of two things. It was this black and white line drawing that came from Rhino, or equally could just have easily been traced in Photoshop. But with that in Rhino, we also produced these surfaces, which gave us a color coding as to how we were going to render the overall. 1 second, I'll just check my time. Oh, good. Okay, so if we just quickly go through the layering that's formed up that image in Photoshop, we had this base rainbow colored rendering plate, and then what we've done is I'll just click those off to indicate how it's come together. From the base rendering, we've added a sky. I'll just zoom out so you can see it. Just a gradient of blue in this particular case, or it could be a imported bitmap. From then, I've added the glazing. Now I'm trying to get a diffused effect in the glazing such that there's some depth and transparency to the glass, and it's just loosely painted with a soft brush. You can see I've laid in a base colour, and then you can see on these various layers here, they've been created by producing a clipping plane. You simply create a new layer, right click on that layer, and then add clipping mask. Okay, in this case it's release clipping mask, so I'll just do it with the top one. Release clipping mask, create clipping mask, and you can see the little icon there clicks in, and you can see how I've added texture to the glass as I've progressively built up those layers. A gradient, the base detail colour, and then spotlights to create light. The glazing frames behind, so that's the glazing layer. Next, I've added in the brickwork, and the brickwork has consisted again just a range of clipping layers, and you can see that a lot of these commands get used over and over. I lay in a base colour to get the general colour of the material, then I fine tune the colour and add texture to the colour by adding clipping plane mask in the form of a gradient. You can see that's lightened the brickwork. Then I've added texture over the top to create the brickwork feel. Next, I've added brickwork detail in terms of shadows that are going to occur underneath the landing. Then I've added the columns the same way, Again, I'll just open that up. You can sort of see, I'll just click those details off. So there's the base colour. I've added in the general colour of the columns. That's it over the top. Then a gradient to get a play of wash of light over the surface. Then I've added lightly the brickwork texture, and then the detail with a little column strip on it. Next, I've added the stairs. Again, if I open up that layer menu, you can see the same details again. The basic colour is laid in, followed by the shading in the form of a clipping mask, and I've done that on the landing, the stairs and the balustrade. Next, I've added the roof. We'll open up that layer level. Just the various elements have been painted in: the fascia, the ceiling light, the feet, the gutters, the AC unit. I'll just click those on and off so you can see them. And they're just highlighted using the magic wand tool, and then I just lay in the colours I need. Almost paint by numbers. Next, I've added some glows and shadows just to give some depth and tonal variation to the surface. I'll just zoom in to give that a little bit more clarity. Okay, and there's a little detail with a light on the left hand side. I'll just click that pen and ink sketch keyline layer on and off so you can see the difference. So I wanted it to still look like a line drawing, so I've left the keyline on rather than a fully rendered surface. I've added some figures to give it some context and a little bit of scale. I've added a tree to add depth, and a few final touches to draw the eye. Okay, so remember the key commands in this one in terms of looking for fresh commands on Photoshop is just the use of the, hold on, I'll just open it up, the use of the clipping plane. So the process is basic rendered material followed by clipping plane in a form of a gradient followed by a texture over the top. Okay, good. Hope that helps everyone. Thank you. Bye.